African.
Hello, you're welcome to another edition of Diplomatic Affairs with me, Harriet Nartey. Now, the African Union was created to accelerate growth on the African continent and to enable it to play a greater role in the global economy, while addressing social, political, and economic issues with African solutions. Now, 60 years down the line, how have we fared as a continent on the back of the African Union? Where are we going? Are we still on course? Every year we celebrate AU Day. What are we celebrating? Right after this break, we will start our conversation. I have a very special guest on today's show to help us really understand the African Union and what it seeks to achieve.
In previous seasons, you saw this.
You are not allowed to hawk or preach in commercial vehicles.
The perception in Ghana is abortion is illegal, and we don't follow up with the exceptions.
The existence of the customary marriage is no prerequisite
for the ordinance
marriage.
Yes. And now, are you ready for this?
Some people express the fact that they don't go on leave with pride.
Accumulated leave, like they term it, is illegal.
Because in Ghana we don't have enough lawyers, and the accused can apply for bail where he has no lawyer.
Knowing full well that you have an STI and you do not reveal that to the person and you have the sexual contact with the person, it is also part of domestic violence.
Join the Law Express panel for relevant, informative, and educative topics.
It is clear that if the court grants bail, it is the registrar of the court that has the power to deal with execution of the bail.
All matrimonial properties that are sold without the consent of the other party are actually null and void.
Welcome back from the break. You're still watching Diplomatic Affairs on Pan-African Television. The show airs every Saturday between the hours of 4 to 5 o'clock p.m. And you can also follow us on all our socials, DATV Ghana, and get in touch or connect with us. Like I said, we have a very important person joining us on today's episode of Diplomatic Affairs as we focus on the African Union. This is something that happens every year. I would want to find out if the youth on the African continent is still very much in touch with the African Union and how we have fared as a continent. Joining me on today's episode is Her Excellency Grace Jeanet Mason, who is the High Commissioner of South Africa in Ghana. And she is also representing the African Group of Diplomats. Your Excellency, it's good to have you once again on Diplomatic Affairs. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
What a coincidence for us to have met right after our trip from South Africa.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure you will tell you stories about it.
But today the conversation is going to be on the African Union. Afterwards, we would find time to pay a courtesy call on you and let you know how things went in South Africa. So we have done 60 years as a continent on the back of the African Union. The theme for this year is accelerated implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, ACFTA.
Yes.
Thursday marks AU Day, 25th May. Is it a tradition or it means more than just being celebrated every year?
Thank you, Harriet. I speak on behalf of the African Union Ambassadors Group. I was nominated by my colleagues to come and represent the AU ambassadors. It is not just a day for us, Harriet. 60 years of celebrating, and you rightly said it in your opening remarks, it's 60 years of celebrating our economic pursuits, socio-economic pursuits for Africa. It is a Pan-African organization that at the apex of what it seeks to achieve, it's to continue in pursuit of solidarity, unity, cooperation, cohesion, collaboration. So every year on the 25th of May, when we celebrate, it's not just a celebration. And as you would look back every year, there is a theme in which we celebrate. So the theme for this year is accelerating the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that is at the apex of everything that we then would do and what member states would then seek to accelerate for this year. The African Union is evolving. And yes, as it evolves, we celebrate how far we've come. We take stock of the 60 years and what are the milestones and what are the opportunities. And we also look at what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and what still needs to be achieved and where can the organization, of course, improve. And there are instruments within the African Union that we need to achieve, that we need to celebrate. And as we celebrate 60 years and looking back, we also, as much as we then self-critique and seek to improve, and as the organization evolves, we also celebrate 20 years of the African peer review mechanism. Now, this is an instrument, Harriet, for African leaders and our nation states to then also do scrutiny of institutions. The ARPM is then to look at compliance with legislation, good governance, policy formulations, accountability, democracy. So this is also a celebration of this institution, their successes with regards to the formation of NEPAD, which is also referred to as the African Union Development Agency now. So those are the instruments that we also celebrate. And when you think about 20 years as we also celebrate ARP, the African peer review mechanism, Ghana was the first country in 2006 to open herself to scrutiny by the APRM to look at legislation issues around good governance and policy. So those are the achievements that we can achieve. And of course, the theme speaks about the trajectory of the African Continental Free Trade Area, what it means for this continent.
What ACFTA means for this continent, we are talking about all 54 African countries coming together, doing business with itself, and of course, harnessing opportunities together. That is a great achievement as we look at 60 years, because I do know that this is one of the flagship programs of the AU. Exactly. Now, how does solidarity find expression in the AU system?
When we talk about solidarity, you're talking about Pan-Africanism. All 55 countries coming together with one common vision, one identity, cooperation, cohesion, finding expression in your opening remarks, you also alluded to African solutions. So we have to find African solutions for African problems. Now you have, we have Agenda 2063 that sets out all the aspirations of our
the African
of
Union.
the African Union's roadmap and what it would then achieve, and in areas in all sectors in terms of socio-economic, political, the peace and security architecture, the reforms that were made. If you look at humanitarian assistance, peace and security architecture, health and welfare, and you know, when you look at the successes as well, Harriet, at a very, very difficult time in 2020, during the global pandemic of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was incumbent upon our African leaders to then also develop a strategy of actually acquiring vaccines for our nations and people. So those are part of the task teams that were established as well. You now have, when we refer to our peace and security architecture, we have an African standby force that is available to go and do peacekeeping in countries that are experiencing conflict as well. And we have threats to insecurity, terrorism as well on the continent. And these are issues that our leaders are grappling with, Harriet. You also have, and as we rightfully say, economic, from where we started in 1963, the pursuit was political freedom, political emancipation. And we've evolved now where it's incumbent for us, in order to ensure our own development economically, you have to have economic emancipation. And hence, the flagship program, the African Continental Free Trade Area, to ensure that Africa becomes a food basket for the whole globe, because we have the capacity, we've got the resources, we've got arable land. Why can we not become the fruit basket of the whole world? And there have been declarations and there have been summits as well. You have the Dakar Declaration, where we then speak about food security, food sovereignty. There are many instances, and also, Harriet, when we talk about reforming ourselves and also critiquing ourselves, you have an instrument, and hence I've referred to the APRM, where we're able to scrutinize and open ourselves and our governments and institutions for scrutiny, because we need to criticize and critique ourselves in order for us to develop as well. So those are some of the successes that we can leverage on and improve our institutions. And like any other institution, any other organization, we want more representativity. And you look at Agenda 2063 and what it sets out, it's inclusivity as well, Harriet, and mainstreaming, and for me, mainstreaming agenda as well. So we're making progress. Inclusivity of women and youth, and the protocols that will also be then concluded by the African Continental Free Trade Area. It's precisely protocols on women and youth. And when you spoke about the youth, are they still vested in this vision? Do they see it as a vision? And what is it that we are celebrating 60 years, and where it is that we are going? And solidarity simply means that we have to move together. There's the African proverb that says, together we can only go further, not faster. So premised on solidarity, a Pan-Africanism, finding our solutions, African solutions for African problems, in essence.
AU solidarity is key in finding African solutions to African problems, like you rightly stated. Recently, we've seen the conflict, war in Sudan. We've seen the Burkina Faso, Mali, many others on the African continent. How do we really tackle these challenges? Because we have food insecurity, like we rightly mentioned. So there are a number of problems that we are faced with, as a continent. AU solidarity is key in all of this. Are we really together in pushing the agenda?
Harriet, yes. When you talk about achieving and the incidences that you've referred to, the conflicts in Sudan, you talk about as well
food
as
insecurity.
Food insecurity, unconstitutional form of governments. These are the issues that our leaders grapple with. But notwithstanding all of the challenges that the organization grapples with, Harriet, there are successes as well that we also have to celebrate. As you would rightly know, that the silencing of the guns by 2030, the achievement just last year of the insecurity and the conflict in Ethiopia. So the peace accord was signed, the Ethiopia-Tigray peace accord that was signed in Pretoria of last year. Those are the achievements that we will continue to pursue: peaceful resolution, peacekeeping, and ensure that we do silence the guns by 2030 as envisioned in the plans of the AU commissions.
Right. So we do admit that we have our own challenges, or the continent has its own challenges. But then again, we have chalked a lot of successes. In the absence of AU solidarity, what happens?
Rightfully, there's nowhere to go, because then you have a fragmented organization. Then everybody's pulling, looking at individual countries looking at their national interest, and we do have bilateral engagements. And as much as we believe in bilateral engagements, multilateral engagement is important. So you don't want to get to a unipolar system. So multilateralism is in the interest of the organization, because together we can find solutions for our continent. You have a continent of a population of over 1.2 billion people. That should tell you, Harriet, that the capacity of trade amongst 55 nations, we need to unearth a gross domestic product of over $3 trillion that comes from just trade within 55 African nations with a population of over 1.3 billion. So, and with all the arable land that we have, we can feed the entire world just as an African continent. And some of the successes, as we'll discuss also the successes and the achievements so far since the operationalization of the African Continental Free Trade Area to date, the protocols that have been signed out of the 5 phase 2 protocols, Harriet, as being announced to us, and as we were also got a briefing from the Secretary General, is that to date 3 of these protocols have been concluded. It's the protocol on investment, on competition, the protocol on intellectual properties. So 2 of the protocols that are still outstanding, which is envisaged to be concluded somewhere in July of this year. It's the protocol on digital trade, which is important for the continent, as well as the protocol on youth and women. And if you look at the continent and just trading, Harriet, 60% of the total trade on the African continent are women. And these are cross-border traders. So there is an opportunity that should be leveraged on. And of course, looking at the youth dividend, which is an asset for the continent, because you have over 70% of young people in a population of over 1.2 billion Africans. You have more young people. So those are the opportunities that our leaders are looking at, harnessing youth, creating job opportunities, and this is exactly what the African Continental Free Trade Area seeks to achieve, Harriet.
Let's look at some of the concepts that you think must be sustained for the cause of humanity.
We should continue with strengthening our institutions, because that's where it starts. Continue to strengthen our institutions, Harriet, policy formulation. Now, when you talk about the African Continental Free Trade Area, it is a catalyst for development. I talked about food security, food sovereignty. We have what it takes. And some of the achievements just in the region where I come from, we currently have a project that's underway in Zimbabwe, agro-processing. So some of the projects that have been identified by the Secretariat in terms of accelerating the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area are looking at specific sectors. You look at the automotive sector, you look at the pharmaceuticals. Those are opportunities where we can immediately leverage on. Agro-processing, agriculture, those are the opportunities that the continent would immediately leverage on. And also some of the successes also, Harriet, is creating your special economic zones and creating hubs. And those are some of the policies and formulations and discussions that we have to do, and look at the priority areas that you need to pursue for the implementation and, of course, sustained development, and also support these institutions and platforms as well that we have, Harriet. If you're not going to support it, who's going to support our own? If we do not support our own, we just had the African Prosperity Dialogue in January, where you had government coming together with the private sector, charting a way forward in terms of continuously engaging and in pursuit of accelerating the Continental Free Trade Area. And business is a important sector. You need the private sector. 80% of production is done by the private sector. So those are some of the dialogues and platforms that are available. You have, and I can speak for hours just on the African Continental Free Trade Area and the successes to date, Harriet. I just came back from South Africa last month. Was the inaugural business summit that was hosted in Cape Town. And that was a huge success, where you have business, private sector coming together with government, having discussions, leading the agenda for the development of this continent, socioeconomic development. At the heart of it, engaging where you find expression, the opportunities for women, supporting her AFCFTA. We have leaders that supported. The president of Tanzania is a champion for women on trade. And there are many that I can speak about, and these are just some of the successes thus far, Harriet, and these are the opportunities, these are the platforms that we should engage with. As we speak, there are now 8 countries that have begun trade on the guided trade initiative, trading in African goods as we speak. Other countries will soon follow, hopefully this year, as we get more countries that will join in the guided trade initiative. So there's many opportunities, Harriet, and the protocols that have been established, and like any institution as well, you also now have the implementation of a dispute settlement body within the African Continental Free Trade Area that will also deal with issues around trade barriers, disputes. So these are some of the policies and formulations that would drive towards the acceleration of the success of this free trade area.
I understand why you are placing so much premium on AFTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, you talked about inclusivity. I would want to talk about the youth. Before we come to inclusivity, let's talk about the key lessons that we have learned so far in the implementation of AFTA to inform the way forward in the next years. What are some of the key lessons that we have learned as we move forward?
The key lessons that we have learned, and of course, from my humble perspective, and as I've alluded to, the milestones that have been achieved, you know, what still resonates with me, Harriet, is the heading, or is it the agenda of the African Prosperity Dialogue that says, and it still resonates with me, that from ambition to action. This has been the trajectory of the African Continental Free Trade Area. It is the creation of a single market for all African countries to trade within ourselves, Harriet. Unearthing a gross domestic product of over $3 trillion within the African continent, and just us trading amongst ourselves. You also have the instrument of the Pan-African Settlement Payment System, PAPS. And what that seeks to achieve, it's not only saving us lots of money, it's envisaged that it will save us up to $5 billion a year in just payment settlements. It also simply means, Harriet, that I can trade Nigeria's Naira with Ghana's cedi.
Wherever you find yourself on the continent.
Wherever you find yourself, and the payment settlements, it's done in our currencies. Now that is finding advantages, finding comparative advantages within the continent. And those are the opportunities that we seek to leverage. And once all of these protocols are concluded, and for youth and women especially, Harriet, the protocol on women and youth will be concluded as envisaged for July. And that is an advantage for young people. We are in the 4th industrial revolution, digital trade, getting youth into trade, but also the small, medium enterprises, your SMMEs, also getting them into trade. So there's a spectrum of and vast opportunities that can be leveraged as we do research and development on market access, entering the market. So all of these protocols would have been finalized, Harriet, and hence the agenda and at the apex of the African Union agenda for this year is accelerating the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area.
How can we leverage research and development for the realization of AFTA? Because research is key.
Absolutely. You need to have the right policy formulation, innovation, technology, but also you have to do research. You don't just start trading, Harriet.
Data.
You need to have market access. You need to research your market access. You need to research market trends, how to access the market, what are the opportunities available in trading. So you need to do your market research, you need to do your analysis, you need to look at development, infrastructure development, getting the right, do research on value chains. And as much as we seek to create resilient value chains and ensure value addition, you need to know that when goods leave from Tema port, to which other port is it going? You need to look at logistics, you need to do research on the market. Are you developing goods that are essentially
In demand
in another market? If whatever it's produced here, but also finding the comparative advantages and the niche in the products. But also as you develop the products, you need to do market research. If your products must leave Accra and go to Johannesburg, have you done the analysis? Have you done trend analysis, market search, access to the markets? What are the logistics? Would you need rail, need to move your goods, rail, freight, and these are some of the issues that you have to do. Market research, research and development is essential. Policy formulation, innovation, technology, use infrastructure. What infrastructure are you going to use? Are you going to use digital infrastructure? Are you going to use data? Are you going to those are some of the research that you have to do. Also, looking at skills development, benchmarking, and you have to do app research and development. It's necessary for innovation and technology as well.
From where you sit, how can we get the youth to appreciate the works or the operations of the African Union and get more involved?
If you want to get the youth engaged, you need to research what is it that young people do. Where do we find these young people? In which aspects do we find? Do we find them on the soccer fields? Do we find them? Where do we find them? What interests do they have? If we are celebrating our organization and what it stands for, and 60 years of celebrating where the African Union comes from, it's telling the story. An organization that was founded by our forefathers in 1963. To date, this is what we've achieved. It's relating. And also finding African ways of engaging our youth and telling our stories. But if we're not going to tell our stories, Harriet, who's going to tell our stories for us? We need to begin to tell our stories to our youth, but find our youth. We're not going to sit and wait for them to come and find us, and every year we're going to have the 25th of May and we're celebrating. But what we're doing different this year is our AU group, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration is doing, is we're doing it differently now. Now we are exhibiting who we are, getting an opportunity to come and showcase our uniqueness, because we are diverse as African Union nations, but in our diversity there is unity, there's solidarity. So we will be exhibiting, getting stalls and exhibiting proudly South African, whatever is proudly South African, from our cuisine to our dress to everything that's proudly South African. So on the 25th, we'll be showcasing, and all other African Union countries that are accredited here. As from our group, we will have programs for the whole month where we will begin, where we will, yes, we've got programs for the whole months set aside that we will then engage and just celebrate the activities of the African Union, but begin to showcase who we are, be visible and be present. So now we are visible, we are present. People will know that you have a country of Egypt that's accredited in Ghana, and we then seek to engage the youth and make it attractive. You are aware that Morocco is the Dean for the African Union group, so Her Excellency has planned with the regional bureau ambassadors planned for. So as next week we'll roll out and then just give you all the details of what we have planned for the AU for this year.
On Thursday, May 25th, my guest is the High Commissioner of South Africa to Ghana, Her Excellency Grace Jeanet Mason, representing the African group of diplomats here in Ghana, and we are speaking on 60 years of the African Union, what we have achieved, the challenges, and of course, how we can work our way through to achieve all our aspirations. There are so many activities, lined up for this year's celebration, and we would want to delve into that right after this break. Please stay with us.
Trasacco Estates, home to Accra's most beautiful and luxurious homes, presents its newest addition, Trasacco Springs, a premium master planned community of service plots surrounded by an exhaustive list of amenities. The gated community of Tema to Accra Motorway presents you the finest opportunity to own a land that suits your preferred size, budget, and payment terms. Trasacco Springs is open to you for development. Our on-site sales executives are ready. Call
AU Day has a lot to offer this year. Of course, KESI, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, and also the African Group of Diplomats here in Ghana. There is so much that you should look forward to. I'm back with my guest, and we will be talking about some of the activities lined up for this year's celebration. Let's talk about the 60th AU Day exhibition. That's very exciting. It's like the newest thing, on the list for this year's celebration. What's happening with that one? I'm excited about that.
Oh, absolutely, Harriet. We are all excited. All the African group of ambassadors, we're excited. Of course, let me take the opportunity by thanking the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration for this initiative. It is time for us to exhibit who we are, our culture, from our cuisines to what makes us proudly African, our unique in terms of language, in terms of culture, food, cuisines. And on the 25th, the activities that are lined up, it's at the forecourt of the State House. We will commence in the morning with the flag raising ceremony. And after the flag raising ceremony, we will then go to the exhibitions. So each of the AU member states and countries that are accredited in Ghana will come and display one or two stands where they then get to exhibit what is uniquely, in my instance, what is uniquely South African, from our local dishes
to our outfits,
to our apparels, accessories, everything that's proudly South African, from our beadwork, everything that's uniquely South African, to our South African wines that have flooded the market. I don't know, can I bring a speaker for South African music as well? But this is a unique opportunity, and hence I'm saying that we thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for giving us the opportunity to be visible, to be able to say this is who we are.
Your Excellency, final words.
Thank you once more for having me on this Pan-African television, Harriet. But also just to say, as we celebrate 60 years of the African Union, let's not forget who we are and where we come from. Let us continue to accelerate, and this year's theme, acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area, creating the Africa that we want, that is prosperous and peaceful. Hashtag our Africa,
our future. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Thank you for your time. It is very well appreciated. Thank you so much. Right, so the theme for this year's celebration is accelerated implementation of the ACTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area. And of course, there is a flag raising ceremony on Thursday, May 25th at the forecourts of the State House. And we should be there at 10 o'clock in the morning and join the diplomatic corps and of course the various African missions here in Ghana to mark AU Day. You have to be there. I know you've been looking for the opportunity to meet the South African High Commissioner to Ghana. We were in South Africa recently. It's very beautiful. We will be talking about it later, but today we are focusing on AU Day, and you should be there to meet all the heads of mission representing the various African countries in Ghana. We will have Mali, we will have Niger, we will have Burkina Faso, Morocco, Egypt, Angola, you name it, Kenya. All of them are going to be there. If you are looking for the opportunity to speak to any of the heads of missions, this is a fine opportunity for you to pass through and get to meet them and discuss business with them. So yes, after the flag raising ceremony, there is the food bazaar session where we will taste the various cuisines, you know, from the African continent. So if you are a food enthusiast like me, you need to pass by and experience our diversity in our food. Well, thank you so much for watching. My name is Harriet Nartey. It's been great once again coming your way with another edition of Diplomatic Affairs. I look forward to seeing you same time next week. Enjoy the rest of our programs.